The palace at Hastināpura is dark. Sanjaya has taken the king's leave and gone to sleep. And Dhṛtarāṣṭra, the blind king whose sons are about to walk an entire generation into ruin, cannot close his eyes. What troubles him is not simply the approaching war. What troubles him is that he already knows the truth. Sanjaya has returned from Upaplavya, has reported nothing useful, and has looked at his king with the barely disguised contempt of a man who has watched the same mistake being made for 20 years. The morning now approaching fills Dhṛtarāṣṭra with dread, and so in the hollow dark of that royal chamber he summons Vidura, whom he calls Mahāprājña, the great wise one, asking for words of comfort. Vidura comes, and what he offers is not comfort. This is the opening of the Prajāgara Parva, the Book of Wakefulness, chapters 33 through 40 of the Udyoga Parva, containing more than 500 ślokas of what the tradition has preserved as Vidura Nīti, the ethical statecraft of Vidura. The word nīti, from the Sanskrit root meaning to lead or guide, carries within it something richer than mere political counsel. Nīti here is the integration of Dharma with Artha, of moral order with practical governance. It is the ancient insistence that statecraft, which abandons ethics, does not merely become cruel, it becomes structurally unstable, unable to sustain itself. Vidura opens not with reassurance, but with irony so precise it functions as a scalpel. He lists in Adhyaya 33, Shloka 13, the kinds of people who cannot sleep. The Sanskrit reads, Abhiyuktam balavata durbalam hina sadhanam hritaswam kaminam choramāvishanti prajagara. Sleeplessness, he says, afflicts a thief, a lustful person, one who has lost all wealth, one who has failed to achieve success, and one who is weak and has been attacked by a stronger person. And then the sentence that cuts, I hope, O king, that none of these grave calamities has overtaken you. The commentator Nilakanta Katurdara, writing in the 17th century in his Bharatabhavadipa, recognizes immediately that Vidura is not asking an innocent question. Every condition he lists applies with surgical precision to Dhṛtarāṣṭra's situation. The king who has allowed his son to steal what belongs to others. The king rendered weak by the approaching Pandava army. The king who has failed or refused to achieve the peace that was still possible. Vidura's first words are a mirror held up in the dark. This is the psychological signature of Vidura throughout the Mahābhārata. He never speaks merely to be heard. He speaks to create conditions in which the listener might actually see. The character description the epic preserves of him is worth holding carefully. He understands quickly, he listens carefully, he acts with purpose. He does not lose his sense during crisis. He neither behaves with arrogance nor with excessive humility. He never speaks ill of others, nor praises himself. In an assembly defined by self-interest and performance, this is almost an alien presence. He proceeds in Adhyaya 33 to define the Pandita, the genuinely wise person. This is not a definition of intellectual achievement. At Shloka 19, Udyoga Parva 5.33.19, Vidura says, Krodo harshascha darpascha hristambo manyamanita yam arthan napakarshanti savai pandita uchyate. One whom neither anger nor joy, nor pride, nor false modesty, nor stupefaction, nor vanity can draw away from the four legitimate goals of life. That person is called a pandita. Notice what Vidura is doing here. He is not cataloging virtues. He is describing stability of direction. The Purusarthas, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, are the four orientations of a well-ordered human life. The Pandita is not someone immune to emotion. The Pandita is someone whose emotions do not function as navigation instruments. Anger does not steer them, neither does joy, neither does the particular distortion that the Sanskrit calls manyamanita, the confusion of wanting to be respected with actually being right. Dhṛtarāṣṭra knows all of this. He has summoned Vidura precisely because he knows it. And yet knowing has never been his problem. His problem, the problem that the epic traces over decades of narrative, is that his knowledge and his action have been severed from each other by what the tradition calls putta sneha, the excessive, distorting love for his sons. He hears the truth clearly. He then sets it aside and defers to Duryodhana. There is a kind of grief available to anyone who has watched this pattern in someone they love. A parent whose adult child is moving steadily toward a self-destructive choice, gambling, a relationship built on contempt, debt accumulating behind closed doors. The parent sees it completely. They may even name it clearly once in a quiet moment. And then the child's certainty fills the room and the parent folds. Not from stupidity, not from indifference, from something more painful, the inability to tolerate the rupture that staying firm would require. Dhṛtarāṣṭra is not a villain in the ordinary sense. He is a man who loves too anxiously to be honest. Vidura, at Shloka 20, offers a verse on the concealment and timing of counsel. Yasya krityam najananti, mantrang va mantritang pade, kritam evasya jananti, savai pandita uchyate. One whose projects remain concealed from competitors, and whose intentions become known only after they have been accomplished, that person too is called a pandita. This verse is sometimes read as purely strategic, but in context, paired with the verse before it, it speaks to something more interior. The wise person does not announce their virtue or advertise their intentions before the moment is right. Vidura himself, in the Laksagriha episode, warned the Pandavas of the lacquer house plot in a riddle, in the form of a riddle, warning them of fire and poison, pointing toward a secret passage. Not silence as cowardice, and not speech as performance. Timing and form are themselves ethical choices. But it is in the Sabha Parva, in the assembly during Draupadi's humiliation, that we see the cost of the dissenting voice most clearly. Yudhishthira has lost everything at dice: wealth, kingdom, brothers, and then Draupadi herself. Duryodhana commands that she be brought into the court. Vidura refuses to carry the order. Instead, he turns to the assembly and speaks. The Ganguly translation renders his words with the force they deserve. Ye that are in this assembly, Draupadi, having put her question, is weeping helplessly. Ye are not answering her. Virtue and morality are being persecuted by such conduct. An afflicted person approaches an assembly of good men like one that is being consumed by fire. They that are in the assembly quench that fire and cool him by means of truth and morality. The assembly does not act. The assembly, populated by grandfathers and teachers and kings, remains frozen. Except Vikarna, one young prince, only Vikarna stands beside Vidura in protest. Everyone else in that hall knows what is happening is wrong. The silence is not ignorance. It is the specific cowardice of people who have calculated the personal cost of speaking. Duryodhana's response to Vidura's dissent throughout the epic is consistent and revealing. He calls him ungrateful. He attacks the messenger. This is the behavior the epic identifies through Duryodhana as the archetype of a person who confuses power with authority and mistakes silence for consent. When the one voice in the room names what is happening, the reflex of the threatened is always the same: discredit the person, not the argument. What is genuinely remarkable about Vidura's psychology across these episodes is that he shows no fear, none that the text records. He does not hedge. He does not soften his counsel when Duryodhana is present, and yet he also understands, with great precision, the limits of his position. He serves without executive power. He advises a king who will not act. His counsel, at the moment of its greatest lucidity, changes Dhṛtarāṣṭra's mind, and then Dhṛtarāṣṭra walks out of the conversation and yields again to Duryodhana. This is what the tradition calls Dharma sankata, the genuine moral dilemma. Not the dilemma between good and evil, which is easy. The dilemma between two valid claims: the duty to serve the institution and the duty to refuse complicity when the institution has become the instrument of harm. Vidura's eventual withdrawal from court before the war is the epic's answer. There are moments when the only truthful way to serve is to refuse to lend legitimacy to what can no longer be defended. We watch this same dilemma in smaller registers all the time. A nurse who has spent 15 years in a ward she loved, watching the conditions around her deteriorate. The corners cut, the fatigue normalized, the complaints filed and ignored. She keeps showing up because she believes in the work. And there comes a morning when she understands that showing up has begun to mean something different from what it once meant. That her presence now absorbs and conceals what should be made visible. Choosing to leave is not giving up. It is the same refusal Vidura makes, the insistence that presence has meaning only when it is honest. Vidura's end in the ashram of Udyoga Parva is unlike any other death in the epic. Yudhishthira goes to the forest to visit the retired Dhṛtarāṣṭra and Gandhari, and finds Vidura's body lifeless. He approaches, and at Adhyaya 29, ślokas 24 through 26, Vidura's spirit passes into Yudhishthira's body. Yudhishthira understands then, at shloka 28, that both he and Vidura were, through the circumstances of their birth, associated with Dharma, that they belong to the same entity. A heavenly voice instructs him not to cremate the body. It is left in the wood. The image is precise and strange. Not burial, not fire. A body left in the forest, its animating force already merged into the one who will carry the kingdom forward. Dharma does not end. It transfers. What to carry forward into your actual day. Vidura's teaching is not that truth-telling is easy or that it succeeds. It is that the willingness to speak clearly, without anger, and without self-promotion, in the precise moment when everyone else has calculated the cost and gone quiet. That willingness is what the tradition calls the Pandita's signature. Not brilliance, steadiness. The fire in the assembly does not go out on its own.